When Jennifer drove her entire family off a cliff, it shattered the perfect image she had created for the world. Jennifer and her wife Sarah had convinced everyone that they were the ultimate progressive couple. They were two white lesbians who had adopted 6 black children, and their social media was filled with photos of happy, socially conscious family living their best lives. People were obsessed with following their journey. Jennifer's actions left everyone who thought that they knew the Harts absolutely reeling. What could make a parent do something so horrific to their own kids? How could such a huge deception have fooled thousands of people? The devastating truth was finally exposed, but it came at an unthinkable cost. From the outside looking in, Jennifer and Sarah Hart seemed to have it all figured out. They were the ultimate progressive power couple, 2 married white lesbians who had opened up their hearts and home to 6 black children. Their social media was like a highlight reel of the perfect multicultural family. There were photos of them looking all super happy at music festivals, going on nature hikes, and just lounging around at home being all cozy together. The image that really made them famous was from a 2014 Black Lives Matter protest in Oregon. It showed their 12-year-old son, Devontae, crying and hugging a police officer. That photo blew up online, and suddenly the Harts were like the poster family for activism and breaking down racial barriers. Everyone saw them as this shining example of what an inclusive, social justice-oriented family could look like. But here's the messed up thing. Behind all the carefully curated posts and smiling photos, there was a super dark reality. Marcus, Hannah, Abigail, Devontae, Jeremiah, and Sierra, the 6 Hart kids, were actually suffering horrific abuse and neglect from their so-called moms. Friends and neighbors started noticing red flags, like how scared and jumpy the kids seemed all the time, or how they were constantly asking for food, like they were starving. But Jennifer and Sarah had a manipulation game that was on another level. Anytime someone expressed concern, they'd just wave it away with some story about how the kids had behavioral problems because of their traumatic pasts. They truly had everyone fooled, painting themselves as these heroic saviors who had rescued these poor drug babies out of the goodness of their hearts. For years, they kept up this picture-perfect image while hiding the ugly truth of what was really going on in that house. Okay, so let's rewind and talk about how Sarah and Jennifer even ended up together in the first place. They were both the oldest kids in their families, so they knew what it was like to have a lot of responsibility on their shoulders from a young age. Jennifer grew up in a small town called Huron in South Dakota, while Sarah was from Big Stone City, which is right on the border of Minnesota. Their paths first crossed when they both ended up transferring to the same college, Northern State University, to study elementary education. They clicked immediately, bonding over their shared experiences and dreams of becoming teachers. But here's the thing. South Dakota wasn't exactly the most accepting place for a lesbian couple back in the late 90s. So Jennifer and Sarah had to keep their relationship on the down low at first, telling people that they were just really close friends. It wasn't until after Sarah graduated in 2002 that they finally felt ready to come out to their families and friends. Sadly, not everyone was thrilled about it. They ended up losing some friends who couldn't handle the truth. But Jennifer and Sarah, they were ride or die. They packed up and moved to Alexandria, Minnesota to start a new chapter together. They both got jobs working in retail, with Sarah eventually climbing the ladder to become a manager. It's hard to say exactly what made them such a perfect match, but if people around them had to guess, it was their shared passion for wanting to make a difference in the world. They both had this dream of creating a family that would break the mold and shatter stereotypes. Little did anyone know that dream would eventually take a nightmarish turn. Jen and Sarah were young, employed, and seemed to have a steady life. In the eyes of the U.S. foster system, they seemed to be the perfect adoptive parents. It was almost too easy for these two to adopt a child. First, they adopted a girl named Lee. 6 months later, their friends and relatives were already worried. Jen and Sarah were always complaining about Lee and mocking her habits. They'd even complained to their work colleagues that she would steal food from the trash. Now, if a kid is stealing food from the trash, that can only mean one thing. She is starving. That year, Jen and Sarah decided that they were done with Lee, so they dropped her back at her foster home without so much as a goodbye. Lee found out from the foster home officials that her moms would not be back to pick her up. And yet these moms of the year would go on to adopt 6 more children. First, Marcus, Hannah, and Abigail. Their first social media post bragged about how they rescued these 3 siblings whom everyone else had refused to adopt before. The post also complained about the kids urinating and an accident that required the Heimlich maneuver. Yeah, all of this happened on the first day. And yet Jen and Sarah painted themselves as these kids' saviors. They wrote, "If not us, who will?" A couple of years later, they were out looking to adopt more children. By 2008, they were a family of 8, having adopted 3 more kids: Sierra, Jeremiah, and Devontae. The same year, their perfect family facade began to show serious cracks. As the Hart family bounced around from Minnesota to Oregon to Washington, people started sounding the alarm about the scary stuff going on behind closed doors. Teachers, neighbors, even relatives were reaching out to the authorities, saying they suspected the kids were being abused and neglected. But here's the thing. The investigations were a total joke. The Harts just kept getting away with it no matter how many red flags were waving in everyone's faces. In 2008, when Hannah was just 6 years old, she told her teacher in Minnesota that Jennifer had whacked her with a belt, leaving nasty bruises on her arm. 2 years later, little 6-year-old Abigail came forward saying the moms had hit her and even held her head underwater, all because they thought she stole a penny. All 6 kids were also saying that they were being starved as punishment. You'd think with all of that, the authorities would have thrown the book at Sarah and Jen. But nope, Sarah just had to plead guilty to a measly misdemeanor assault charge and got off with some community service and probation. No jail time, nothing. Even worse, the couple was allowed to yank the kids out of school and start homeschooling them, which basically meant that the kids had no one looking out for them anymore. The same thing kept happening when they moved to Oregon. Someone made an anonymous report about how malnourished the kids looked, and CPS finally started poking around. They uncovered all these disturbing details about the Harts being super strict and withholding food. But when they talked to the kids separately, the poor things were probably so terrified that they took back everything they said. With no hard proof, the Harts got off scot-free and hightailed it to Washington. And about how easy it was for these 2 to adopt? Turns out the adoption agency they used had a history of cutting corners on home studies. Even worse, Devontae's aunt tried to get custody of him and his siblings, but she got shut down over some technicality. It's like the system was working overtime to fail these kids at every turn. At multiple junctures, child welfare officials and adoption authorities missed opportunities to intervene more forcefully on behalf of those vulnerable children. From removing them from the Harts' custody to denying or delaying the adoptions in the first place, actions could have been taken to disrupt the cycle of abuse. But time and time again, the system gave the Harts the benefit of the doubt, allowing their charming public image to overshadow the troubling realities. Meanwhile, Jen and Sarah were flooding their social media with photos of their happy kids face painted at so-called transformation festivals, dance, yoga, and interacting with a community that they claimed was the only one who accepted them in their diversity. The truth was, their families accepted them. It was Jen and Sarah who didn't want to get too close. At this point, their families were trying to save their children from them, and they weren't going to let that happen. This is what people saw on the mom's social media. Devontae asking people to honor the earth and being the social change they wanted to see. Seeing this, you might be fooled into thinking this was a model family. But later, court records and witness accounts paint a horrible picture of Jennifer and Sarah's parenting behind closed doors. The women used food deprivation as a cruel punishment, with the children often reporting going hungry. They were also quick to resort to physical abuse for minor infractions. In their Minnesota home, the basement was set up like a classroom, with the kids relegated to small wooden stools instead of desks or tables. Friends recalled them looking listless and robotic, forbidden from laughing freely, and required to raise their hands to speak. One relative said anyone who questioned the Harts' methods would be cut off completely. After the 2011 abuse conviction, the Harts pulled the children from school under the guise of homeschooling. This served the dual purpose of avoiding further reports from mandatory reporters like teachers and giving the mothers totalitarian control over every aspect of their kids' lives. By restricting access to other authority figures, the Harts eliminated the threat of outside intervention. As the family bounced between Minnesota, Oregon, and Washington, the physical and psychological abuse escalated. On top of the beatings, food denial, and forced cold showers, more disturbing details emerged. The children were severely underweight and undersized due to malnutrition. Neighbors noticed their incessant hunger, with 12-year-old Devontae sneaking over to ask for small food packages. 15-year-old Hannah jumped out of a second-story window late one night, running to a neighbor's doorstep, begging for help and claiming the Harts were racist abusers. The neighbor was alarmed but allowed the Harts to talk them out of reporting by insisting Hannah was troubled. The kids seemed robotic and fearful around their mothers, standing stiffly at attention as if they were terrified of them. Hannah later issued a flat written apology to the neighbors that sounded scripted. Inside their Washington home, the children shared one room with no toys or decorations. Officials noted the lack of any signs that kids truly lived there. 6 innocent kids were basically living in a never-ending nightmare, cut off from anyone who could have helped them. They were completely at the mercy of their crazy, abusive moms who could flip out on them at any moment. Honestly, the abuse had probably been going on from day one, but it just kept getting worse as the kids got older and started standing up for themselves more. But without any real help from child services swooping in, Jennifer and Sarah were free to keep terrorizing them. It's like they were prisoners in their own home, always walking on eggshells, never knowing what might set off their mom's hair-triggered tempers. And the saddest part, no one on the outside seemed to be able to put the pieces together and get them out there before it was too late. The neighbors Hannah had run to begging for help, Devontae had also begged them for food. Dana said that in other incidents, Devontae would beg her and Bruce to hide food near the fence, separating their properties so that Sarah and Jennifer wouldn't see it. Dana and Bruce called CPS on March 23, 2018.
Yeah, there's some kids that I feel is being highly abused.
But the family was already on the road. 3 days later, everyone would be dead. In March 2018, there were no posts on Jen or Sarah's accounts. As they'd left in such a hurry, they smashed through the little stone wall in front of their Washington home. Their cell phone records tell the tale. They drove through Oregon to California, stopping for gas and food several times. The children were not seen on any of the CCTV footage that caught the moms. At a Walmart in California, Jen and Sarah bought a big bottle of Benadryl, a strong antihistamine that can make you dizzy and confused. An overdose can lead to seizures, coma, and death. That day, Jen and Sarah laced their children's sandwiches with Benadryl. 19-year-old Marcus got 20 pills. Around the same time, Sarah was Googling how much Benadryl would it take to kill a 130-pound woman. Jennifer also drank several bottles of beer, even while driving. Sarah continued to Google, "Does it hurt to die?" was her last search. She also took 42 Benadryl pills that day. In Westport, California, Jen drove herself and the entire family off of a cliff at full speed. Shortly after 4 p.m. on March 26th, officers were called to the scene. Another driver had been spotted in the car wreck upside down on the rocks at the bottom. Everyone but Devontae was found, passed away from blunt force trauma. Devontae's body has never been recovered. However, there is evidence that he was in the car when it all happened, so a coroner issued a death certificate for him too. There was plenty of evidence to support that Jen and Sarah had done this intentionally. First off, the car had accelerated into the ocean. There were no skid marks on the ground. Then came their cell phone records, Sarah's internet searches, and the Benadryl found in everyone's system. Then came the countless accounts about the children's abuse, as always, tragically ignored and not taken seriously enough until it was too late. Let's just take a moment to unpack how messed up Sarah's statement is. First of all, correct me if I'm wrong, but the last time I checked, no one was holding a gun to Jennifer and Sarah's heads, forcing them to adopt. That was a choice they made, not once, not twice, but 6 times. And that's not even counting Lee, the first kid they took in and then straight up abandoned. By the way, they could have stopped there. Adopting a child is a massive, lifelong commitment. You cannot just collect them like Pokemon cards and then act like it's someone else's fault when it gets too hard. And yeah, I get it. Sometimes we grow up with these ingrained beliefs that we need to have a huge family or whatever. But here's the thing. As educated, grown adults, we have the power to break those cycles. Jennifer and Sarah weren't helpless teenagers trapped in their parents' worldviews anymore. So for Sarah to try to pawn off the blame for their horrific parenting choices onto some imaginary person who didn't give them permission to have a smaller family, That's not just laughable, it is downright infuriating. Those poor kids suffered unimaginable horrors at the hands of two people who should have been their fiercest protectors. Sarah's statement is a slap in the face to Marcus, Hannah, Abigail, Devontae, Jeremiah, and Sierra. When the news broke about the Hart family murders, it sent shockwaves rippling through every community they had ever been a part of. From their progressive circles in Oregon to their biological family members back in Texas, everyone was absolutely gutted. For some, the picture-perfect facade had been ripped away. For others, it was tragically unsurprising. Jen and Sarah's families had been trying to get closer at times, even to adopt some of their children. But the more they pushed, the further their moms moved. By 2018, they had pretty much cut off all contact. Now, people were demanding answers. How could a couple with a history of CA be allowed to adopt 6 kids without any real pushback? Some folks couldn't help but wonder if Jennifer and Sarah's status as a white lesbian social justice warrior had earned them a free pass from usually intense screening processes. When it all comes down to it, the Hart's case is a devastating wake-up call about the dangers of letting a carefully curated image take over reality. It would be easy to write Jennifer and Sarah off as one-dimensional villains, but the truth is a lot more complicated than that. By all accounts, on some level, they probably genuinely believed they were doing right by their kids and the world. They were so caught up in this white savior complex that they convinced themselves and everyone else that anyone who questioned them was just persecuting them for their lifestyle. Their adopted children, who were already carrying the weight of early childhood trauma, had the rotten luck of being cast as unwitting players in the Hart's twisted production. Instead of finding the love and stability they deserved, these kids were subjected to a special kind of hell. Abuse, masquerading as love, neglect disguised as social activism. And with so few adults in their lives who could see through the smoke and mirrors, they paid the ultimate price. As we remember the Hart children, let's honor their spirits. Devontae's joyful smile, Hannah's brave escape attempt. This tragedy is a call to action. Be vigilant for hidden abuse. Listen to kids' voices and create a world where no child suffers in silence. Only then can we prevent more heartbreak. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below and let me know what you do to be an active bystander and keep the kids in your life safe. And before you leave, don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you soon.